You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners, here's how the channel works. We bring you episodes Monday through Friday, 30-minute episodes, as well as our 60-second YouTube shorts after the game. And now, which is very new to our channel, we have the Royals Postcast, which is hosted by Chance Lebo. He comes to you live after each and every Royals game for about 15 minutes or so. You can comment during his show. He really does a great job of it, and I've had to fill in a few times. I've had a blast doing it, but you can expect Chance moving forward. Before we dive into today's show, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off on your first order. It was another lackluster performance for the offense last night in a 5-1 loss to the Tampa Bay Rays, a Rays team that is playing much better of late. And really, if you go back to the last time the Royals and Rays squared off, which was at George M. Steinbrenner Field at the end of April and the first day of May. I believe that series went the 29th to 30th and then the 1st of May. It's a completely different Rays team just based on how they're playing. I mean, that Royals pitching staff was able to hold Tampa Bay to 3 runs all series long. It was one of the few sweeps that the Royals have had this year. And now you look at this Tampa Bay group, and everybody seems to be hitting in that lineup. And it started off, very quickly last night for that group. I mean, they get the 2-run home run for Danny Jansen. They just keep scratching across runs, whether it be off of Chris Bubic or it be off of the Royals bullpen. But the pitching last night was not the issue. Chris Bubic had a quality start. I thought that he was getting a lot of swing and miss. He did a good enough job against a very talented lineup. It was the defense that let him down, and he can include himself in that. He had an error that contributed to another run scoring, but Maikel Garcia had a ghastly error at third base that cost him another run. So Chris Bubic should have only allowed 2 earned runs last night, and it came with 2 outs and nobody on. You get the single and then the Danny Jansen home run. But again, it was not the pitching staff's fault for the 5-1 loss. It's not ideal to give up 5 runs, but that offense didn't have a base run until the 6th inning. And it just feels that at home, and we'll talk about the home struggles in the final segment of today's episode, but it really does seem that this offense, when they fall behind early on, just don't put together great at-bats. I can recall one time this season, and that was the Jack Caglione debut in St. Louis, a game that we were in attendance for, where they were able to constantly put together good at-bats and scratch and claw back into that game, and then won by 3 runs. I mean, they were down 7-2 in a rivalry game and found a way to score 8 unanswered runs. And everybody in that lineup was putting together great at-bats. But that's the only one fresh in my mind that I can recall that when they were behind earlier in the game, they didn't really panic. They worked the count. They drove the ball hard. They weren't popping up as much as they've been over the course of this entire season. I mean, everything about what they did in that game was almost perfect offensively. Hard hit balls, moving the runners over, working the count, drawing walks, situational hitting. And last night, you're staring down the barrel of a 2-0 deficit. You need a runner, a bloop, and a blast. You need a runner and someone to run into one. That's all you needed to tie up the game. But at no point did that game feel close. I mean, with the way Taj Bradley was throwing, and yes, I will tip my cap and say that he was throwing phenomenally last night, but Taj Bradley, as we brought up in our series preview, had one of the highest qualified ERAs among starters, and the Royals had seen him before. So we can't use the excuse of, well, there's not much of a book on him. They've got a pretty large book on him. They've seen him multiple times before. He had been really roughed up in his last outing, giving up 7 earned runs and an inning and a third. So yeah, maybe he was due for a bounce back. But to take a perfect game into the 6th inning, I mean, It's frustrating to watch. It's incredibly frustrating to watch, and I know you share that same feeling. I know that from time to time I might talk people off the ledge of, it's not as bad as maybe we think it is. Last night was one of the more infuriating performances just because you were not down by a whole bunch. You're at home again, but when that two-run home run happens, you just don't see any competitive at bats. And the point of this segment is to point out the hot and cold of this lineup and how they can't do that for much longer. Like, we are 2 games away from the 81 game mark, the halfway point of the season. And you go back to last week, the offense plays very well in Arlington against the Rangers. They play well in game one against San Diego. And now 3 straight games where the offense doesn't show up. And stop me if you've heard that before. When the Royals have gotten hot and they have played well, you have seen that offense put together great at bats. And you keep telling yourself, this could be the point where they take off. This can be the moment where we say the offense finally resolved its issues. But then you have stretches like this, and it's understandable to have a game where you get shut out, where you score only 1 run, a good arm on the mound. Maybe they just got something working and you didn't really see him up that well. Like Jacob Lopez with the Athletics. Funky arm angle. He's coming from the opposite side of the mound, it feels like. And just for right-handed hitters, that ball is just in the other batter's box all game long. You're just not seeing him that well. So that happens. But that's all right for it to happen once against a bad team or once against a bad pitching staff if you follow up with the next 2 games hitting the ball well. Like, San Diego lost game 1, and they didn't hit well in game 2 or game 3, but they were able to pick up those final 2 wins. We just haven't seen that from the Royals in a long time. And we'll see how they respond tonight. I'll be out there at Kauffman Stadium. We'll see how they respond tonight and how they respond tomorrow, depending on what happens, the outcome tonight. But this 38-41 record is not the end of the world. They're 3.5 games out of a wild card spot. I've said that so many times over the last handful of weeks. We know they are within striking distance, but you can't keep doing this hot and cold with the offense, at least of late. I understand all season long they have been a very poor offense. They've scored less runs than the sub-20 win Colorado Rockies. I get all of those points, but I'm more so getting at they're heating up a little bit. They may sweep a series. They may win a couple of series, but then you go 7 or 8 games where you're not scoring. You can't do that in the second half of the season if you expect to be contending. And maybe that means they need more bats in this lineup and need them sooner rather than later, because I'm looking top to bottom at what they're getting from a number of players. They got 3 guys right now with an OPS plus over 100, over the league average. 3 in that lineup. Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino, and Michael Garcia. Those are the only 3. Their outfield has 3 guys that are under 100, well under 100. I mean, Jack Caglione, small sample size, but Kyle Isbell's now been in a treacherous stretch. He's reverted back to what we've seen over the last handful of years. Drew Waters, same exact thing. Off the bench, you're not getting anything from John Rave, from Nick Lofton. Freddie Fermin's been fine as a backup catcher, and you certainly take what he's giving you, but he's a below league average bet just based off some of those numbers. Mark Canha, not doing enough. And so you need the depth, and you need 2 more bats to this lineup to maybe even out this style of play. You know, you can have, over the course of 162, your hot stretches and your cold stretches. That happens with everybody. Like, the Yankees were red hot, then they didn't score a run for, 3 or 4 games. And they really struggled in some series that they should have won, if not swept those series. That happens. But the Yankees are still a top 5 offense in all of baseball. The Royals are a bottom 3 offense in all of baseball, or a bottom 5 offense. And it's been these stretches of games where they score maybe only 3 runs in a series. And that just can't happen if you expect to keep pace with everybody else. You have to find some common ground. It's not that you need 6, 7 runs a night. You don't. Not with this pitching staff. Not with this bullpen. You need about 4. If you can get 4 runs a night in the second half, you can be a playoff team with the way that this rotation and bullpen have pitched. But the great offensive series in Arlington, followed up by a poor 2 games in San Diego and a poor game 1 against the Rays. Like, you don't want the 4 good games and 3 bad games. That's too inconsistent. If you're looking at 7 games, give me maybe a 4-3 stretch or a 5-2 stretch, but it's consistent. And you'll probably have more stretches where you're 6-1 instead of 4-3 when the offense has just evened out. But I can't keep saying we'll give the offense time to even out, because they've got 79 games under their belt. You need more help with this offense, and we'll dive into that in our next segment here. JJ Picollo had the chance to talk to the media before the game about what to do, buying, selling, how they may go about it, and I'll give you my thoughts on what he said next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Ever wish managing your money felt a lot easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Now, I'm in the spot where I'm trying to make sure that I'm setting aside enough money, keep trying to save up for a house. And if you've got tons of payments going to different subscriptions, and I know I talk about it a lot, but you want to make sure you have those in check. And there's been too many times that I look at my bank account and wonder, where did a couple $100s go? And then I realize I'm putting it towards stuff that really doesn't matter. So if you're like me, you want to take control of that, know where everything's going to, Monarch Money is absolutely going to hook you up. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB for half off on your first year. So JJ Picollo had the chance to speak to the media before the game yesterday about the trade deadline, where this team is at, and what they will try to do. And I don't believe it was too much of a shock that he said we'll be open to anything, right? You have to be honest there. If this team is 10 games under 500 by the deadline, you're probably going to be selling, even if you are 6 to 7 games back of a wild card spot. You just have to understand at that point, there's no move that you can make financially or what you have in the system to put your team over the edge. It's just not worth it at that point. So now it's about getting some players for next year and trading off guys that you may not expect back in 2026. But some of the comments that he made, I did want to dive into a little bit for this second segment. Now, the first one that he brought up in Andy Rogers' article was, quote, whether it ends up being where we're in a position that we're in it or in a position we're not, you're always trying to improve your team. He goes on to say, if we're within striking distance, and I don't know what the record will be because 500 seems to be a playoff record right now, I don't think we should panic and say the season is over because there are just too many games left in the season. We're trying to be positive. We're trying to build off something that was really positive last year. Making the playoffs again this year would be really important in this organization and really important to this city. So we'll start there with what was said. Maybe I've brought it up before. If I haven't, I just can't really recall. But this team in 25 years has made it, and you can go back way further than that, right? Because they went from 1985 to 2014, 29 years between playoff appearances. So from 1985 to 2025, you're talking about that time period. They have made it to the postseason in back-to-back years one time. 2014 and 2015. So you are talking about that type of gap, and you've only done it once. I wholeheartedly agree with what JJ Picollo was saying, because it's nice to make the playoffs one year. I mean, you enjoy the season. I mean, last year was so much fun. You enjoyed going out to the game. You loved scoreboard watching. You loved the postseason atmosphere, seeing them win a postseason series. That was all great. But a lot of times, those teams that catch lightning in a bottle, the next year they fizzle out and nobody really remembers them being in the postseason. It's happened to many teams not named the Royals before. So it is important to show that Last year wasn't a fluke. We are building something here. And that is an enticing part for free agents in the offseason. If you make it in 24 and you make it in 25 and you're trying to make it in 2026 and you were telling your players that we are trying to compete each and every year, and to the fan base, it's important in building a winning culture because you want people to buy into what you're doing. You want people to believe in what you're doing. We're going to show up to the ballpark because that's just the expectation. We expect to show up to the ballpark and see a winning baseball team. Gone should be the days of, well, we're tanking. We're having to reload a little bit. We're having to rebuild a little bit. And that can be frustrating when the rebuilds take 6 to 7 years. So what JJ Picollo can be doing at this deadline is certainly be smart about this. There are a lot of teams in the American League wildcard race, as we brought up in yesterday's episode. If you're within 3 to 4 games, you can find a way to buy and not mortgage away your future. And if you are giving up legitimate pieces of your farm system, you can get guys in return that can be the answer to some of your problems, not just this year, but for next year and maybe even the year after that. That's what we've seen with JJ Picollo since being the, acting general manager of this franchise, is that he wants to go out there and bring in players that are more than rentals, that are guys that help you next year, the year after that, guys with years of control. And I envision something happening like that this year, if they are in it, of course. If they are not, we had an episode discussing selling at the deadline, who they would be looking to sell. Seth Lugo jumps to the top of that list. Jeff Passan and Kylie McDaniel's article yesterday indicated that he would be one of the top trade chips if the Royals were sellers at that point. But if they're not sellers, I do understand the importance of getting back to the postseason, even if it doesn't end in an American League pennant or a World Series championship. That's always the misconception to me in sports in general, right? Whether you're a college football fan or a college basketball fan, if you are an organization or a program that hasn't done it a lot over the course of 30 to 40 years, getting to the tournament or getting to a bowl game back-to-back years, there is an importance in that. Playoffs, same thing in the NFL, playoffs in the NBA. You are trying to establish a culture and a new era of your team that we expect to win. And the Royals have lost a lot of games over the course of 25 years, a lot of bad teams. So if you're one of those people that says, well, it doesn't really matter if they're not getting to the World Series, no, in my opinion, it does matter. Because having postseason baseball and competitive baseball for an entire season is vitally important to sustaining that. If you have the one-off year, we saw the Marlins do that 2 years ago. And now you look at where the Marlins are at. They're going to be one of the worst teams record-wise in all of baseball. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that each and every year they are putting themselves in a position to win a lot of baseball games, to get to October, to find themselves fighting for an American League pennant and then a World Series championship. And so how you approach the deadline, you can have that in the back of your mind. You want to be smart. As I said, I am not advocating for buying when you are 10 games under 500 or 15 games under 500. If you do not believe this team has the legs to make it to the finish line, then you got to be smart and try to get talent for next year and the year after that, which is what JJ went on to say in this little dugout press conference, was that we're going to be trying to improve this team one way or the other, whether it be buying to try to make it to the postseason or selling to help this team long term. We are going to be trying to improve this roster. And next year, they're going to try to win as well. Don't get that twisted. This team, even if they don't make it to October, is not going to look to next year and say, well, we're not really that close. No, they'll probably be more aggressive in the offseason with hopefully a better market out there than there was this past offseason. It's not to make excuses for the lack of going out there and getting talent, but some of the guys they were in on haven't done anything. Anthony Santander hasn't done anything. Jurickson Profar is suspended. Randall Grichuk, not good enough. Like, some of those names just haven't amounted to much, and they wouldn't have made this lineup any better. But if they are in it, and if they are trying to make a push, there are ways you can improve this roster in the now and in the future, as we've told you about before. But you have to be careful in it, because if you feel that this team has the legs to make it to the finish line, and you have to give up, a top 10 prospect in your system or multiple to get it done, Well, I would say that you got to be pretty sure that the guy you're bringing in doesn't take 30 games to get going. You bring in the guys and they immediately make your offense better because the second half push, even though there's, 70 plus games that you have left in the season, it's really not a lot of time when you think about it. You have to hit the ground running. And the Royals have two more against Tampa Bay, two vitally important games with the Dodgers coming into town this coming weekend. And then you've got the Mariners and the Diamondbacks after that. There's really no let up. And as I brought up 2 weeks ago, I've said that a lot in this segment, but they're going to be able to know by the end of June, in my opinion, what direction they may be going. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, what's the deal with the Royals' home struggles? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnMLB and use promo code LockedOnMLB for 15% off. The Royals have not won a home game in the month of June. Their last home victory was on May 31st when Chris Bubic tossed a 1-0 shutout, or he had 7 shutout innings, and then the bullpen was able to get it done in the 8th and the 9th. So against the Tigers, May 31st was the last home victory for this team. So they've had 8 consecutive losses, I believe it is. They had the loss to Detroit in that series finale. Actually, I take that back. I think there was a 1-0 or a 2-1 win, and then they lost 1-0 on that Sunday when Chris Bubic did throw. So that May 31st game was the last home win that they did have. Or maybe it was May 30th. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. They have not won a home game in the month of June. And they have played a combination of good teams and bad teams. They've played the Tigers, they've played the Yankees, they've played the Athletics, and now they've played the Rays for one game. And you can't really put your finger on it, truthfully, why they weren't able to win any of those games. You would think being back at home, you get to stay in your own house, you get to stay in your own apartment. It's not a long drive to the ballpark, I'd imagine, for a lot of those guys. It's very comforting. You can get into your usual routine and you're not thrown off by anything. You don't have to worry about any bad weather. I mean, it's going to be hot and it's going to be humid, but you're used to that. You play in this ballpark 81 times a year. And for whatever reason, this team has really struggled in just finding a way to start a game well and finish a game well over the last 8 games. I can understand the Yankees series. That's a good team that you were playing. They seem to have your number. No excuse for the Athletics, and I get you have a good team in Tampa Bay that's in town for 3, but you were never competitive at all in that game last night. There was not any point, innings 1 through 9, where you felt that they had a legitimate chance to win that game. So what is this issue? And Jonathan India talked about in the press conference last night that they might be pressing a little bit. They might be trying to hit the ball too hard, hit the ball over the fence. I mean, being as honest as Vinny Pasquantino's been a number of times, but how many times can you say it before, it just kind of becomes words? They're just hollow words. Empty promises of, we're going to get things figured out here. We're going to get things rolling, because you can only say it so many times before people just go, well, you got to show me at some point. Why would you be pressing? Why would you be trying too hard coming off a 4-2 road trip? Yeah, you didn't play well on Sunday in the final few innings of that game, but you had a winning road trip and you have a great team coming in, a team that's ahead of you in the standings. Why does that happen? And we don't talk NBA at all on this podcast, but I feel it's a good time to bring this up. Pascal Siakam was asked in, I believe it was the Eastern Conference Finals, why they lost game 4, game 5, whatever it was. And he said they just played better than us. They wanted it more than us. And how does that happen? Well, it just happens. That's sports. And so there is a part of that where in sports, sometimes it's just not your day and it's the other team's day. And in baseball, you play so often that it's as random as tonight. The Royals come out there and hang 5 on the board. I'm not calling for that to happen because the offense hasn't done that at all this year. But they just come out there and work Tampa Bay innings 1 through 9. Like that, there is a possibility that happens because that's baseball. And maybe the Rays just don't have it tonight, or maybe they don't have it on Thursday. But why is it happening at home? You can see the logic in playing on the road. You're out of your routine. You're playing in front of an opposing crowd. Maybe that team's red hot. They're playing with momentum. There was no reason the Royals should have come out as flat and lifeless as they've had in the last 8 home games. Against the Yankees, big crowd. Jack Caglione's home debut, flat. Athletics, you've got Alex Gordon's retirement ceremony, flat. And a bad Athletics team that had not won a road series in I don't know how long, or they were, like 5-25 in their last 30 games, flat in all 3 games. Big crowds in all 3 of them, completely flat. Detroit, that last time they had won a home game, that series in general, flat. Didn't play well on Friday night. They won on Saturday, flat on Sunday. And then game 1 last night, flat again. So what can the cause be? How can they change this? And maybe, that was a part of that players only meeting of, we're not flat. We're still trying to win these games. That's, what I wouldn't agree with people saying they're not trying or they're not into it. They don't have any energy. There's a difference in not trying and then just being flat. Like sometimes you're just not as intense as the other team. It doesn't mean you don't care. And I do believe this team cares a lot. And I do believe this team is trying to make things happen. They are trying to go on a stretch of games where they get back over 500 and they are absolutely back in the divisional hunt. They're back in the top wild card spot hunt. They want to get rolling to that point. But they are playing some good teams. And at the end of the day, they're not as good as Tampa Bay right now. They're not as good as Detroit. They're not as good as the New York Yankees. They're better than the Athletics, and they didn't show it in that series. And that's more inexcusable than some of these other losses. But I look at this offense too, which has been the topic of today's episode. You've got too many guys here that just are not even average big league starters anymore. And that's the cold, hard truth, unfortunately. There are too many guys in the lineup that are getting everyday at-bats that are not moving the needle. And when you look at Tampa Bay, top to bottom, they're still getting a little bit from guys they're not counting on. They've got their heavy hitters, Yandy Diaz, who's great, Junior Caminero, who's great, Jonathan Aranda, who's great. I mean, there's no let up at the top of that lineup. But then you get to the bottom. They got Danny Jansen, who can run into a 2-run home run. He doesn't do it all the time, but he can do enough damage. And the Royals are not getting that from the bottom of the order. And the bottom of the order was an issue last year. But too many guys are below league average bats. And I believe that's factoring in right now. Coming out flat, is more so about this offense. It ain't about the pitching staff. Chris Bubich threw a quality start. When they had this first loss of the losing streak at home, they lost 1-0. The pitching staff was not flat. Against the Athletics, there were a couple times the pitching staff was not flat. Michael Lorenzen had a quality start. Now, you got enough from Noah Cameron on that Sunday game. The offense did not do enough. And I believe that's coming down to the fact that there are just some guys that are not everyday starters at the big league level. And you're trying to get enough out of them. You're trying to get them to become just average bats. And we've got a big enough sample size now. And that's what's going to be so entertaining and intriguing about this trade deadline. If you bring in 2 more bats that are even league average, does that change things? Does that change the energy of this team? It finally gives a boost to this offense of we can go 10 to 15 games in a row of scoring 3 runs or more in all of them. You might have that one-off where you don't play well, but it's only due to the fact that we are playing a top-end starter, not getting shut out and have a perfect game against somebody with an ERA near 5. We'll see what version of this team we get tonight. It'll be Michael Wacha on the bump against Drew Rasmussen. The Royals will try to even up the series with a first pitch at 6:40 p.m. That'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we might hold off, even though I like to get the episodes out before 12:30, a little bit different we'll recap tomorrow's game and we'll recap tonight's game. So we might just wait until later on, although I will be a little bit busy after work. So we'll see. TBD on that. If I do get an episode out tomorrow morning, it would be very early on. So it wouldn't be an episode that comes out, 30 minutes before first pitch of that series finale against the Tampa Bay Rays. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.